I didn't.
I'll give it a second here. There we go. I was like, where's that music coming from? There we go. No, it was coming from my Bluetooth phone. It was hooked up and my music was playing on my phone.
You guys use Crisp?
No.
Crisp is I use it on my home system. It costs like $10 a month, but it filters out all the background stuff.
Really? My studio is really quiet, but unfortunately, when we're out and about, it's rough. All right.
Crisp filters out like 98% of your background stuff.
Okay. All right, here we go. Welcome to American Whiskey. As always, I'm your favorite host in the whole entire world, Big Sturg. Over on my left side, your right side, we have
Robbie Reigns.
And on my right side, your left side, we have
D.A. Roberts.
All right, these guys are going to talk about a little bit of Bigfoot, and we best-selling author right here, right, sir? That's correct, yeah. So got a great series. We'll talk about that as well. If you guys are not here, you better get here. It's a good time. We're going to be here tomorrow from 9 to 9. I think it goes till 9 tonight. So we definitely want you guys to stop on in here. And if you can't, grab a beer, grab a whiskey, grab whatever it is you sip on, sit back and relax and hear these fellas talk about Bigfoot. Maybe they'll make you a believer, because I am. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and let's get started. All right, guys. So we talked earlier. I'm Big Sturg, and this is American Whiskey Podcast, and we normally go around and to like whiskey festivals and stuff. So this is a really cool opportunity to kind of get involved with a kind of like a new scene, you know, and we're really excited about it. I want one of you guys to just start and introduce yourself, what it is you guys do, and we'll get into maybe a couple stories or something like that, you know?
Sounds good. Robbie, you want to start?
Yep. Well, I mean, you can start since you the host with the most, or I can start and say the best for last, however you want to go.
I don't know about the best for last. Definitely the baldest.
But I don't know about all that. But anyway, like I said earlier, my name's Robbie Reigns. I'm one of DA's co-hosts on DA Ex Machina. I'm a police officer, been a police officer for about 28 years. I'm not showing my age. Had my first sighting in late 82, early 83, somewhere around in there in my home state of South Carolina. You know, back then, if you had a sighting, you were crazy. So I kind of suppressed it for 40-something years. And what actually got me back into it, I never got out of it, but what got me like actually where I'm at right now is I read one of DA's books. First book I read of his was the Wild Hunt, one of the Wild Hunt series, Odin's Call. And there was one line in that book that brought the entire experience that I had when I was a kid, brought it all back to me. DA had his website or his email address in the book. So I didn't expect a call back or anything like that, or response or anything. So I emailed him, told him I was a police officer, told him I appreciated it because it was so real the way he wrote, and that I really appreciated that. Where could I get the rest of his books? And told him that I had a sighting and all that kind of stuff. So he responded, and well, he laughs now because we always talk about 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 10, 10 turned into 20, 20 turned into me being one of his co-hosts.
Yeah.
So I've been a co-host for 2 years now, 2.5?
2.5.
And we've gone and done some field investigations together. I live in South Carolina. He lives in Missouri. So it's about a 12.5-hour trip for me, but I've been down this place and seen some of the places in the books and things like that. And, this is just, it's a passion I've always had. It's a passion that I never could express because people always call you crazy.
Yeah.
When, if you're a believer, you've heard that before.
You're
what I find so funny is I've had people look me in the eye and say, yeah, I believe in aliens and I believe in ghosts, but yet I'm crazy for believing in Bigfoot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how you can accept one without accepting the other.
Yeah.
So,
and how can you deny something and believe in something crazy on the other side? Like I know exactly what you're feeling. I think Dylan kind of thought I was nuts when I told him I believed in Bigfoot, because I had an experience when I was like 17 years old. And, it's those experiences are something that stay with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's something you can't undo in your mind.
Right. It's that paradigm shift. Once that switch is flipped, you can't flip it back the other way.
That's exactly right. So, what about you, Matt?
Well, I spent most of my adult career at law enforcement like Robbie. I did about 20 years in uniform before my back went out. So So I'm retired now. Kind of not by choice, but there it is.
Yeah.
But I've been investigating and looking into Bigfoot since about 1975.
Okay.
Since I was a little kid. And I grew up on a farm north of a little town called Lebanon, Missouri. If you're listening and you're from Lebanon, I'm sorry. But Lebanon's not exactly civilization as most people think of it.
Yeah.
But, I grew up on a farm outside of a small farming town. And there were surprisingly a number of people that had sightings of their own. But what really cemented it for me is my uncle Buddy. He technically wasn't my uncle anymore. He was married to my mother's sister and they got divorced. But he was just my uncle my whole life.
Yeah.
He was full-blood Cherokee. And I grew up with him like a second dad. And he's the first adult that ever just set me down and said, hey, these things are real and you really need to be careful when you're out in the woods. Because I was a farm kid. I was out in the woods constantly.
Yeah.
And we, because of those experiences, talking to him and on his land, he lived out by Eldridge, Missouri, out in the middle of it. I had something approach my deer stand one night and grunted at me and then walked away. And then the following deer season, I had a 12-point buck taken by one.
Really?
And ever since then, I've just been absolutely hooked. But
now, did you see that happen?
I didn't see it, but there was really nothing else could have done it.
Yeah.
And it was a big buck. It's not something like somebody would have just shouldered and walked away with.
Right.
I'll give you the kind of whole story of that. I shot I waited for, I had buck fever, man. I wanted to get a good buck and I waited and I waited and waited. And I finally got a really good one. And I hit him in the side, the soft-nosed British 303 round, and he dropped immediately. Well, by the time I climbed down out of the deer stand and got over there, he'd got up and staggered off. But I knew it got him good because there was a large quantity of blood in what hunters refer to as lung butter on the ground.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I got him.
Yeah.
But he headed off toward the bottoms, which my uncle had always told me to stay out of. When it went down and then it dropped off a little embankment down into a dry creek bed. Well, it was about 20 feet down and I couldn't climb down in there. I mean, I saw where it fell and it had bled out. It was done. It was laying on the ground. I'm looking right down at it. But it was too far for me to drop without breaking a leg. So I backtracked down this little ravine looking for a place I can drop. I'm gone maybe 10 minutes. I get back down to that ravine. It's gone. Yeah. Not a drop of blood.
I was going to say, was there a blood trail or anything?
Nope. Not a drop of blood, not a footprint. Nothing. The ground was very rocky, spiraling out looking for blood, and I can't find any more blood. So we had to load the radios. I got on the radio, told my uncle, and I said, hey, I think somebody's out here on your land because there wasn't supposed to be anybody out there to me. Yeah. And he said, where are you at? And I said, I'm down in the bottoms by that old dry creek bed. And he said, get out of there right now. I told you not to hunt down there. He said, that is not a person that took that deer. Get out of there. You're going to join it. Yeah. And when I got back up to the house, he said, what these things I've been telling you about, that's where they live. And that's why we don't hunt down there. Yeah. He said, your deer went down there and now you don't get that deer.
Now, did your uncle have experiences as well?
Many times on that land.
Like what was the wildest experience that you heard from him?
He said the one that freaked him out the most was he in his basement. He had a walkout basement with a sliding glass window. Yeah. And he had a pool table down there. And he was down there shooting pool one night, and he said, just out of the blue, he just kind of felt like something was watching him. And he turned and looked at that sliding glass door, and he saw something that filled the entire glass. Yeah, it was crouched down looking at him. He said that thing, I don't know how big it would have been standing up, but all it had to do was just open that door and walk in. He said the door wasn't locked. Yeah. He said, and I see that thing staring at me. And when it realized I'd seen it, it turned and took off. He said, so I grabbed a shotgun and went out after it. And his house built on a side of the bluff over the Niagara River. And that bluff was about a 70-degree angle. And he said it was running down the side of that bluff, grabbing saplings to slow it down. Yeah. And it went straight down the side of that bluff. He said, if it could do that, it could have got my house at any time. Yeah.
So, I've always kind of wondered, if Bigfoot's real, I've never seen any reports of any attacks on humans. I mean, have you ever heard of that?
There are lots of documented attacks.
Really?
In fact, one of the earliest known documented attacks occurred in a book called The Wilderness Hunter, which was written by Theodore Roosevelt, President Teddy Roosevelt. He wrote a book, and I believe it was in 1882, called The Wilderness Hunter, where he documented his exploits across the West. Okay. And in that book, there's an incident called the Bauman incident, where two men go up trapping up in the mountains of Montana, and one of the two men gets killed by Bigfoot, and Bauman escapes. Bauman never came forward. He was only mentioned by his last name in the story.
Really?
And it just said it was a guy of German descent named Bauman, and that's how he dropped it. But the level of detail that's in that account, I've interviewed hundreds of people that have had sightings, and I've never been able to drag that much detail out. That was written by somebody that was there. I think Bauman was Teddy Roosevelt. And I can kind of argue that point in favor. Well, one, Teddy hadn't run for political office yet, so he didn't want anybody to think he was crazy and seen a monster. And two, Teddy Roosevelt was on the sculling team when he went to Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what his position was? He was the Bauman.
So did he write it?
Yes, he wrote the encounter story, claimed he heard it from a guy named Bauman. But
Really?
I truly believe it was Teddy Roosevelt. But so if you can accept the premise that Teddy Roosevelt actually had a Bigfoot encounter, flash forward to when he becomes president, what's one of the first things he does?
I don't know.
He created the National Park Service, which set aside 88 million acres of habitat.
Really? That's wild.
A big chunk of that we're still not even allowed access to.
Really? So like federally protected.
Exactly. You can't even fly drones over national parks.
That's
Really?
one of those and the plot thickens moments.
Yeah.
So go deeper into this. I mean, it's, we have people on here that think it's a load of crap, right? I mean, just like you just said a few minutes ago, people think you're crazy or whatever, and this and that. But for those people that don't believe, because here's the matter of the fact, a lot of people just believe science because it's science, even though they don't know for a fact, right? But they'll believe it. What are some things you could say? Here's a fact. Here's a fact that I can bring to the table that you can't disprove. And someone could look it up.
I've got the perfect one for you.
Okay.
You can Google any of this. Okay. People say all the time, if there was an ape that big, we would have found it.
Yeah.
That we would run across it. In 1999, a group from National Geographic in the Congo, they were looking for something else entirely. They put out They were putting out camera traps and track traps. They found what is referred to now as the billy ape. It's a chimpanzee that can be as much as 6 feet tall, and the locals call them lion killers because they hunt and kill lions. They are the source of the old killer ape theory. These are aggressive, primarily bipedal, in the 6 foot range, and their closest living relative is the eastern Eastland lowland chimpanzee.
Okay.
This is a newly discovered species in the last 25 years that, for all intents and purposes, basically a smaller Bigfoot.
Right.
It's largely bipedal. It eats meat, and it will go to war against other clans of its own
Really?
kind.
So how long have you said
75 is when I really
1975?
started getting into it.
And you said your first experience was what year?
Between 82 and 83.
Okay. So not too far apart.
No.
Is this something that you guys, you both are in law enforcement? Has that ever came out? Have you ever been in law enforcement and got a call like about something like that?
Well, we've been asked that question before, and we're both from different states as far as our law enforcement goes. So they're different. They're called different things, but I've answered a lot of prowler calls, quote unquote prowler calls. If you're calling the police for something like that, you don't want to be thought of as crazy, and you want the police there. So
yeah,
more than likely they're going to say, "Oh, there's somebody outside of my house." So, and they'll tell you, because we've had these discussions away from our show. 9 times out of 10, when you get those prowler calls, you get there's nobody there.
Right.
So
almost every time, for sure.
Yeah.
And I've had prowler calls like that too, where they didn't want to give me a description. It was just a big guy, and he was over there in the bushes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably more officers than not have had calls like that. They just don't know that's what it is.
And I've over the years, I've gone to training with other departments when I was still active, and I've talked to a ton of other law enforcement officers who told me their encounter stories that said absolutely under no circumstances are you to mention my name, because most of these guys are still cops.
Right.
And the last thing you want as a cop is some defense attorney trying to destroy your credibility. Oh,
Right.
you had a Bigfoot sighting.
No, that makes sense, and for a lot of people, that's all that matters. The credibility and but it's crazy because I'm kind of into like alien stuff too, like the story of Roswell. The day after Roswell happened, the Air Force published all kinds of stuff in the paper,
And then went back on it.
Yeah, and then they. I mean, there's 90-year-old women out there that were there when it happened, helped picking up debris, and then the next thing you know, they took a balloon and scattered it around. But there's women on a documentary right now on Netflix she said that they came to her house, threatened her, and they're like, well, why you talk now? And she's like, I'm 89 years old. I don't care.
Yeah, what are you gonna
We
do?
don't really care. So my husband's deceased now, and so they're talking about it. And it's like, you know, if the government lied about that, what else is there? Because you just said how many millions of acres was.
I think the government knows about them, and I think they've
I
known
do
about
too.
them for a long time.
I do too.
Yep.
Well, there's so many stories that came out of when Mount St. Helens went up in 1982. There were so many stories of them hauling Bigfoot carcasses out by the truckload.
So what about bones? I mean, we had a question on that the other night. You know, while you're there, ask people why they don't find bones. My response, and I'd be interested to see what you guys think. But how often do you walk through the woods and find bear bones? It doesn't happen.
There you go. That was exactly where I was going to.
So who knows what happens when? I assume are they together in the woods and as a family? And how do you like when one of them die? How do you know what they do with it?
I think deep below ground in caves, but I think we have found bones many times. If you Google giant bones in North America, you will find on the map there are literally thousands of locations where they found giant bones.
Yeah.
And when the Smithsonian gets involved, they vanish.
Right.
Lovelock Cave, they found the bones of what they called red-haired giants that were in excess of 7 and even 8 feet tall. They found the bones, and they were on display in the museum in Lovelock, Nevada. The Smithsonian sent a representative out there and said, we would like to study these bones. Lovelock still has the receipt.
So for those who don't know who they are when they come in there, who are you referring to? Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian Institute.
So explain.
Museum.
Okay. So what are they doing with that, or what's the purpose of making that disappear?
Probably to control a narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think is most interesting.
That can't be hard to believe.
Oh yeah. Well, the Smithsonian, it was really not built to document a lot of the discoveries like Lewis and Clark made.
Yeah.
It was meant to give credibility to the manifest destiny claim that we were here taming a savage land, that the savages ruled North America, and we came in and we saved them and we brought civilization.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. There were civilizations that were here long before us.
Yeah.
You don't need to look any farther than the state of Illinois. Cahokia, Illinois has the Cahokia Mounds. The Mississippi people built massive temples and had a whole civilization that went across the Midwest. Yet you've got to really dig to find any evidence of that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because in Enon, Ohio, they have a huge Indian burial grounds. They're a big hill, and there's that protection around it, and it's really, I actually get really, it's a really eerie feeling when you're there, but you can feel it. Like it's very interesting.
Well, and you can even simplify it even more than that. We looked into this. You want to call it the outdoor budget or whatever you want to call it, the monetary figure on what the U.S. makes per year with these campsite, let's cut the recreation, $33 billion a year.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden the government comes out and says, "Oh yeah, it exists," you get two problems. For one time, you're going to lose a lot of money for people going in camp. I ain't taking my family in there anymore. And then you have a bunch of people who want to go in there and be the first one to bag one.
Well, don't you think too that it would, like, I think like UFOs and aliens and all these wild things. Do you think part of it is to not cause mass people like that? They're going to share it because they control and feel safe, make us feel like we're the only one.
I think that might have been the case 50, 75 years ago, but I think today people are pretty much inured to it. Like when the government started releasing cockpit footage, saying these are UAPs, these exist. It was front page news for a couple of days, and most of they just
right.
Well,
so I don't really think it's going to cause mass hysteria to admit.
To go on that, think about when we went live after all those things happened. What was it, last year or whatever it was during the Super Bowl, and all the one that got shot down in South Carolina, one got shot down over
Alaska, the Great Lakes,
and in Alaska, whatever. The press secretary the Sec Def, was he there too? They had a big news White House press conference release. It was on YouTube.
Really?
It was buried.
They didn't preempt the Super Bowl. They released it, but they didn't make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
And coming from people my DA's age, when the White House
Puts out a statement
or goes live, it used to cut everything off.
Right.
You're watching your favorite TV show. You're watching a game, the big game. It didn't matter. Whatever was on TV. When the White House come in to do their announcements or whatever, that was all you saw everywhere.
It's interesting you said that. I'm going to go back to like the UFO thing and how the government like doesn't make it a huge deal. There was 2 jet fighters in the air a couple years back, and they got dispatched to randomly 2 flying objects in the sky. And everyone thought it was fake. Those 2 Air Force pilots were just in front of the Senate talking about this, and they have video of these objects going, but it was, they didn't make it a big deal about this them coming to the Senate and talking to them, trying to pass some type of bill, and I don't remember what it was, but like it was. I'm like, why isn't there more people watching this? Why isn't there more coverage on the news about this? Well, it was really intriguing to me just because I'm like, I'm interested in it, but like, isn't that kind of like important to?
You'd think that would be front page news.
Like if there's Bigfoots in your backyard and your kids are out back there playing and you're in the middle of the woods and you live there, shouldn't you know?
You think, but
shouldn't you know that? Like,
I grew up at an age when I'd go out to play in the backyard or in the field. My grandparents would say, "You need to be back up here before it gets dark because the boogers will get you."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and my great grandparents told me the same thing.
Well, they don't make those. Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Right.
That's what. Well, back in the day, that was a real thing. Like,
those homilies are there for a reason.
Yeah, and we've talked about that on the show multiple times. If you look at every major civilization in this world, on every continent in this world, every one of them, every First Nation tribe has some type of
Bigfoot story,
or a Dogman story, or anything like that. Well, why is that?
The Piri Reis map. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
The Piri Reis map. It's PIRI space REIS. Piri Reis was a Turkish admiral in the 8th century. He had a map. He had a part of a map that they believe was a copy of a much older map. And you can Google this. You can look up the Piri Reis map. I've got a copy of it at the house. We did a show about it. The Piri Reis map, they couldn't figure out what landmass it was. They're like, what is this? Well, they had showed trade routes and ships. They were like, this doesn't match up to any harbors or anything we can find. This map was from the 8th century. And again, believed to be a copy of a much older map. In 1972, the Navy compared that map to seismic readings, to acoustic readings of Antarctica.
Really?
And it was a map of Antarctica without ice on it.
Really?
Yep.
That's
and
crazy.
in the margins of that map are both Bigfoot and Dogman creatures.
Wow. That's wild.
Yep.
Now people listen, I mean, that's a fact.
Yeah. The Piri Reis map is real. I'm not just blowing smoke for blowing smoke's sake. That's a legit deal.
So, I mean, do you guys think at any time in our lifetime like this will be a thing? Like, do you think?
I think that our government has already been doing what I like to refer to as soft disclosures. There are trailheads you can go to where it'll be marked. It'll say, animals you may encounter on your hike. And a lot of the U.S. Forestry Service's those warnings are now including Bigfoot.
Really?
There was an Army survival manual from Fort Joint Base McChord Lewis in Washington that listed Bigfoot as one of the dangerous animals that you would encounter on the survival course. So I think the government has very quietly just been admitting a little at a time. And in 2019, right before COVID hit, and you can look this up too, on the floor of our own Congress, in Washington, D.C., they attempted to update federal hunting rights to include certain near-human chimeras.
To protect?
To protect.
So I've heard it's illegal to shoot one.
Yeah. A lot of states have already done it, except Oklahoma, who went the other
depending on
direction.
what state you're standing
Then how can you make it something illegal if it's not real?
Right. Except Oklahoma, they went the other direction. They put a $3 million bounty out on one brought in alive.
But my point, how do you put a bounty on something that's not real?
Exactly.
How do you make something illegal to kill if it's not real?
Right.
And just think of it in simple terms. And think about all the footprints that are that are found throughout the world. If this is a hoax, what kind of infrastructure would this have to be for that to be a hoax that's been perpetuated for as long as it? That would be
From what, the 8th century? He just talked about,
think about how many millions of people and manpower hours that would take to put tracks in places that you don't even know if somebody's going to be in the hopes that they would find it. I mean, just think about it.
It's kind of interesting too. I like a lot of believers. I'm a believer in Christ, and I was talking to one lady, and she was talking about. Is that you? Did you find that?
I took that picture of that track in the Great Smoky Mountains, just outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
That's crazy. That's
and
wild.
there's a business card next to it.
That's crazy. How big was that?
About 21 inches long, 20 or 21 inches long.
I got big feet. That
across the wide part of the foot, it was
I
about
didn't know
8
you-
inches across.
I didn't know I left my footprint there.
It's about 8 inches across, and it was about 1.5 inches into the rocky soil.
Okay.
On a 45-degree angle.
On a
Did you get a
45
cast?
degree. No, I couldn't because it was on a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
And it started raining about 15 minutes after I found it.
And it downpoured, but I got a lot of pictures of it.
The Book of Enoch.
I've never read it, but I've heard a lot about it.
Like, there's like, I forget how she explained it, but I Googled it and I looked into it. And I'm like, well, does the Bible even kind of have some of these?
Yeah, when they talk about Nephilim.
Yeah, it's kind of intriguing. So it's like, this didn't start in 1975.
No.
This didn't start in 1982. It didn't start for me. It didn't just start when I was driving home with a girlfriend one night and we saw this massive thing. Where I didn't know what it was. Now I'm a little older. I'm like, was it a Bigfoot? We went around the turn, and I cannot tell you how fast this was. We went around the turn and went whoop. We stopped at the stop sign ahead. We looked at each other. We're like, I didn't want to say it. I'm trying to get, I got a girl in the car. I'm not trying. She said, "Did you see that?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "What'd you see?" I was like, "I seen like a Yeti or something." And she's like, maybe it was like a gorilla. I was like, we live in Springfield, Ohio. Unless one just...
That's funny. I'm in Springfield, Missouri.
That's hilarious. Unless a Bigfoot or a gorilla just broke out of the Cincinnati Zoo or the Columbus Zoo. But it's those experiences. A lot of people won't believe that story. If I told them that, people would not believe that story.
Right.
And prior to 1998 or something like that, the phrase dogman didn't exist.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they called it a wolfman or a werewolf.
Yeah.
Prior to 1957, the phrase Bigfoot didn't exist.
Right.
But if you look at Native American lore across North America, every tribe's got their own name for it. And if you Google wild man or hairy man encounters, you will find newspaper articles dating back to the early 1800s of wild man encounters near settlements.
Bigfoot.
Yeah. They didn't know to call it.
In other words, Bigfoot.
Yeah, they didn't know what else.
It's interesting now. I'm sure you fellas have been to some pretty crazy events like festivals, right? I mean,
and some interesting ones.
We went up to Salt Fork Reservoir. Maybe you guys are familiar with that or not?
I've heard of it. I've never been.
So dude, they've got. We took the whole family there last summer, I think, and everything there's Bigfoot. I mean, they've got signs of saying like here was a Bigfoot sighting in 1999, and so I started taking all these things. I'm reading it online over the last couple of weeks here as of late. And I'm like, so what do? You can't believe what everyone says, right? You can't believe everything, but you can't disprove everyone. Yeah. If there's millions of people that have seen over the, let's just say millions of people since the 8th century. Is everyone lying?
Yeah, is there this massive worldwide conspiracy to fool us all?
Just think about it in simple terms of if even one of those sightings is true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, I mean that footprint. That didn't come from a gorilla.
Nope.
That didn't come from that wasn't a bear.
And
bear tracks are very, very. You know if it's a bear track.
Even my wife, who's a skeptic at best. She tolerates me going out looking for Bigfoot and stuff like that, but she doesn't want to go. When we saw that track, she was like, "Oh my God!" And the night before we found that track, something growled at her outside of the bathroom window, the cabin we were staying in. And I went out the next day, and that window was 14 feet off the ground.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Do you know when you'll watch like Bigfoot Explorer and all that, and you see those structures that they put up, those wood structures? What are those?
Okay. This is the territory we're probably going to make people mad. those shows, and this is my opinion, and it's DA's opinion too. We've talked about this extensively. Those shows are built on views,
Right.
things like that.
Right.
A lot of that stuff I think is staged for mountain monsters.
Because what would be the point of it?
Yeah.
No, I do believe there are some tree structures that are legit. I've talked to a lot of researchers in the Midwest that have found like tree bows and tree X's, and each time they found them, they've been near a large cluster of medicinal plants.
Okay.
Like,
So
well,
is
for
it
example,
a way to mark?
I think they're marking either a territorial marking or a location marking, because so many of Native American herbs that they have used as medicines for thousands of years.
Right.
We're discovering truly do.
Right.
I mean, look at they used to prescribe foxglove tea for people that had a bad heart.
Yeah.
But digitalis, which is a medicine we use to treat heart patients, comes from the foxglove plant.
Right.
Spruce bark. If you strip a piece of bark off a spruce tree and chew on it, it's a natural painkiller.
Really?
Yeah.
You ever tried it?
Yes. Tastes
Did
like
it work?
crap.
Did it work?
Yeah, got rid of my toothache.
So, that's interesting. Have you guys ever came across? So the book that I read, it was a short book, and I can't remember what the author's name was. They were talking about how they came across a lot of maybe like like piles of bones, like carcasses of like deer and
Kind of like a kill site.
like a kill site. Do you think that's legit?
Well, there's a place down near Eldridge, Missouri. Not Eldridge. Can't remember the name of the little town. Starts with an E. It's in southern Missouri. But there's a place down there they call the Killing Fields.
Okay.
And just outside of a cave, they found thousands of bones of different animals.
And there's a lot
leading up to this cave.
And I think there's been a lot of those, right? I think there's a lot people have found those.
But we found a kind of a small one on Blunt Road. I mean,
we went down to an area called Blunk Road outside of Galena, Missouri. And we went out, it was probably 2:00 in the morning. It was pretty late. And Robbie was visiting in Missouri, and I wanted to take him some of the places. There have been Bigfoot sightings down off Blunk Road, and it ends at the James River, which flows down into Table Rock Lake. And as we're pulling down there, it's dead of night, absolutely pitch black. And my son Noah, he was in the back seat of the car, and Robbie was in the passenger seat. And I start slowing down. I'm like, what the hell is that? And Robbie's like, what? I said, right there through the high beams. I'm like, that in the middle of the road. There was a severed deer head laying in the middle of the road. It hadn't been cut off.
Yeah.
It had been ripped off.
Yeah.
And then farther down, we found more deer. One that had the top of its skull ripped off, and the brain was gone. And we found its hide. It's not like it had been skinned. We found the hide right by the head. It had been pulled off.
That's funny. It's interesting because there's reports out in the West of like cattle ranchers that would find their cow in the middle of a field, and it would have all the insides ripped out of the out of its ass, and then they would have eyes removed and tongues removed and the brain removed. Like that was on a documentary on Netflix that
the Meeker, Colorado.
Yeah,
so that's a big one for that.
That's pretty wild.
When you talk about the head that we found in the middle of the road, the tongue was missing, and I believe one of the eyes too, right?
And one of the eyes was gone, the tongue was gone.
And those were reports, like those were actual factual. I mean, police reports, dude. Like those, that stuff is not like whether you believe it happened or not. It did happen. Yeah. It happened to thousands of farmers.
And the thing in Meeker, Colorado, because we actually did a show on this because our other buddy Doc lives in Colorado, so
he doesn't live very far from Meeker.
Yeah. And one of the sticking points for me is, they do the little half-ass autopsies that they do, and it comes back with unknown canine DNA. Yeah. In this day and age, tell me what an unknown canine is.
Right. No, that's a fact. I mean, that's odd. That's odd.
Yeah, you can send your dog's blood sample into a lab, and they can tell you it's 35% German.
Oh, people do that. They adopt from the pound, and it ends up being a mutt, and they send it out and figure out what the
but for it to come back unknown canine,
that's not happening.
What is that?
Yeah, that's them not wanting you to know.
That's them. Either they don't know what it is, or they won't admit it.
And you get the ones like the Amazon driver that they swear up and down, and it was the dogs. And they have pretty much, that's it, it's done, but they haven't closed the case.
And that's how the law enforcement avoids you getting a Freedom of Information Act copy of the report.
Yeah.
They will list the report as still open.
Yeah, right.
And until it's closed, it's not subject to a Freedom of Information Act.
I've ran into that because before I started doing this, I did for a few years true crime.
Mhm.
And a lot of these cases were, not solved cases. And, so I would try to reach out and get the case files. And a lot of them, they don't want to do it because they're open cases still. And some of them are really sketchy, like really sketchy homicides. And I'm like, it's been 30 years, man. Like,
Well,
what are you trying to hide? Like,
that incident he mentioned that happened near Lexington, Missouri. An Amazon driver was killed, and they blamed the dogs
really?
at the house. But and if it had been the dogs, the sheriff's department would have released the necropsy on the dogs.
Yeah.
And no human remains were found in the dogs.
Really?
They wouldn't release it.
I mean, it would have blood or something.
Yeah, the dogs. They had to actually break into the house to kill the dogs. Dogs weren't even in the yard. And I know for a fact, I got this from in your law enforcement. You make connections.
Yeah.
A friend of a friend kind of thing, who knows both the sheriff and the county coroner for the county where it happened. And both the sheriff and the coroner said they had never in their careers seen a body that torn up.
Really?
Yeah.
You can't tell me two dogs did that.
So if I were to try to get those files, they won't do it.
No,
that will
the
not
case is
subject to
still open,
FOIA.
so you
But
can't
how can
FOIA
it still be open if they said the dogs did it?
There you go. That's
My point exactly.
$1 million question.
That's what we keep saying. Well, if the dog did, it's a closed case. Why not close it?
Case closed,
so
baby.
we can see the case files. Another weird one that happened in Missouri was back in 2023. A badly destroyed human body, male, was found on a sandbar in the Missouri River. The department that went to the crime scene responded. I know one of the deputies works for that department. As soon as they reported it to the state, the state took over the investigation, kicked them out, and they didn't even go into an investigation. They just backed the body up and left.
So open?
Yeah, still open.
Mm-hmm.
Not even the name of the guy was released.
Interesting, right?
So how can you solve it if you don't give the name?
How can you solve it if you don't investigate?
And then the deer hunter.
Again, same year in Missouri, a deer hunter was out in his deer stand and he didn't come home. And they went out looking for him and they couldn't find him. But then when they went out, started searching, they found him I think it was a few miles away. He was dead. It didn't get cold enough that night for him to have frozen to death. And they found his rifle leaning up against a tree miles away from where he was at. They said, well, he probably put the rifle down to track the deer. What deer hunter puts down the rifle?
Is it open?
Yeah, it's still open.
Yeah. And they said he died of hypothermia.
Yeah, they said he died of hypothermia.
But why is his gun so far away?
Yeah, exactly. Why would a deer hunter leave the rifle behind?
They don't.
Exactly.
I've never left mine behind because sometimes you got to shoot it again.
Well, here's the thing too. It's protecting you as well.
Right. Yeah.
Not only are you out there hunting, but I when I hunt, I carry a sidearm as well.
Oh, I always do.
For safety. So
we say all the time that just because you're looking for Bigfoot doesn't mean you don't have to worry about other things.
Well, how do you know you're hunting them? How do you know they're not hunting you?
Exactly. Well, there's still, even without take Bigfoot and Dogman out of the equation, there's still plenty of things out there that'll hunt you, that'll kill you. You got bears, you got mountain lions, you got wolves, coyotes, snakes, the greater North American meth head.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. When I had a conversation with one of the tenants. I'm a maintenance guy. That's what I do by trade. And I'm in an apartment working on a toilet flange the other day. And he's like, "What are you doing this weekend?" So I told him I was headed, and it was really interesting to me because it was like, what's the word? A folk. He's called it a folk tale. He's like, it's a folk tale.
Yeah.
But then he's a conspiracy theorist. And so he started kind of talking about, he wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He just, he didn't believe in conspiracy theories. And I said, well, conspiracy theories and Bigfoot are two different things. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, there's plenty of conspiracy theories out there that have no backing, zero backing. That it's called a conspiracy theory because there's no evidence. There's zero evidence. And he wanted to argue with me. He's like, well, that's the same thing with Bigfoot. So
tons of evidence.
So here's where I was like, okay, Bigfoot might be real. The most famous Bigfoot picture where that he's like, it's far away and he's walking like this.
The Patterson-Gimlin.
Yeah, thank you. I said, I've Googled and looked and checked. There's no one in the world that's ever been able to disprove.
Well, when that was filmed in what, 1967?
It was, it was
same year that the Planet of the Apes movie, the first Planet of the Apes movie.
When that video was of the Patterson-Gimlin footage, when that video,
you can see him walking.
Yeah, when they released that video, they took a copy of that video to the special effects team that did Planet of the Apes, and they said, "There's no way we could build that suit."
Yeah,
and that's Hollywood with the best technology of the day.
They said if we Or the guy said, if we could have done that, you would have seen that in the movie.
Yeah.
And they said there's no way that
you believe it's real too.
Oh, absolutely.
So that to me, I didn't know a whole lot of evidence. I still don't, but that was my thing. So he Googles it, in the apartment, and he looks at me. He looks it up. He's looking. He's like, everything I see, they can't disprove it.
Yeah.
So what the fuck do you think that means, dude?
Exactly.
Yep.
If it can't be disproved, because in my eyes, that's what I like. That if you can't disprove something, then how is it not real?
Yeah, well, here's the
Right?
thing, Robbie and
You
I
understand
brought
what I'm
up.
saying?
Here's the thing we've talked about many times. Robbie and I in our careers have both seen guys go to prison for a long time.
Yeah.
On eyewitness testimony.
Right.
Eyewitness testimony alone.
Yeah.
But you get talk about
And you got 12 people that did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can
They
start
send
talking
them
about Bigfoot and eyewitness testimony, something no good.
Yeah. And that's where, the court system's sometimes flawed because you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but
Right.
it seems like you have to prove
That's the way that's the way it's gone now.
and that's good. But it seems like that's how the Bigfoot world is too. Like it's not possible. A lot of people say it's not possible. It's not a thing. Well, then disprove it.
Right.
You can't. That picture's wild. I'd like a copy of that picture.
Sure, I'm happy to text you.
I think that's super sweet. And that's personal. Like you were there or no?
No, that was just me and my wife there.
I wasn't. I was
So your
there.
wife saw it.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't physically. I was in.
Was it a
Gatlinburg at
high
the same time.
traffic area?
No, we were up in the mountains above Gatlinburg.
So were there any other prints?
There were other scuff marks. Like I said, I was going up the side of the mountain. I went out there and I found lots of other marks that were partials, but I had that one perfect print.
That's crazy.
And I would have given anything to be
I
able
would have
to
got.
cast-
Did you get chills?
Oh yeah, I was absolutely freaking out. I'm like, honey, come
Scared?
No, not so much scared. I was more excited.
Have you ever, other than your hunting story, have you ever had an experience where either one of you have ever been scared for your life or anything?
We went to a place called it's an old abandoned campground in Missouri called Combs Ferry, and we had rocks thrown at us. We were yelled at. We were stalked in there. We've had some pretty hairy moments
Together?
Oh yeah, but
That's what I was saying earlier. Like, how you're hunting them, but how do you know they're not hunting you?
Exactly. Well, we came up with a theory a while back that what people refer to as tree knocks may not all be wood on wood. We think they're doing a big chunk of it with their mouth, like that. And I did that on the porch of that cabin like 3 times. And then it was just a few hours later, she got growled at outside the window the next morning. And found
Really?
And something banged on the side of the
Yeah,
window
something
later.
hit on the side of the cabin.
And knocked
That's crazy.
Knocked the infrared.
Yeah, broke one of the security lights on the front of the cabin. The
Wow.
motion activated sensors. I went out there the next day and it was snapped off.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys all night. This has been very interesting. I'd love to have you guys on again sometime.
I'd be happy
Yeah.
to, man.
Get together some questions for you guys and sit down and really dive in. This was obviously an interview I wasn't prepared for, but this has been pretty wild. And that picture's insane. I'd like to put that on our Facebook
Sure.
and tag you guys and just say,
My email is on that card. Just shoot me an email and I'll
Okay.
email you a copy.
Okay.
I'll get you a much better copy of it than it's on my phone. 'Cause
Okay.
that's just the one that I keep on my phone.
Yeah.
I actually got really good high quality images from
Cool.
DSLR.
All right. That's awesome. Now, how do they find you guys? Is that on here?
You can find us on our show. It's called DAX Machina.
Okay.
We're on every Wednesday and Saturday night at 8 p.m. Central.
Okay.
You can find us on YouTube and on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm also a writer. I've got 33 books currently in print with another one about to come
How
out.
do they get those?
You can find those either on Amazon or on my website, which is daroberts.net.
Okay. We'll share that over the next couple of days so that way we
I
can get
love
our
it. Thanks,
listeners.
man.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll connect again, guys. This has been really cool. I got some other cool questions interesting things I'd like
Hey,
to
man, we're
ask
happy
them.
to run down the rabbit hole anytime.
Yeah, man.
yeah.
It's always fun to me. We just did a 2-hour episode the other day, just going down rabbit trails. And it's intriguing. Like and especially when you're talking about something that people have experience in. It's just not talking about folktale. You guys have experience, and that makes it even cooler,
Well, when we were talking earlier about Teddy Roosevelt,
Yeah.
we just kind of stuck our toe in the water. There's a whole can of worms.
We could
for
do a
us.
whole episode on that.
We have done an entire
That's
episode
awesome.
on Teddy Roosevelt.
We've done a 2.5 hour. Well, we've done multiple.
Yeah.
Because
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot to.
Well,
Teddy
maybe we
Roosevelt.
could share that on our podcast and
Let's
see what people say, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, guys, I really appreciate your time.
Hey, my pleasure, man.
This was one of
Oh, man.
my favorite
enjoyed
ones.
it.
This has been a great time. But I'd love to get you guys on remotely too sometime. I know you guys got your own gig, but I know a lot of people here would like to hear,
Yeah, I'd love to do it, man.
so
As my buddy Kerry would say, I'm down like 4 flat tires.
that's a good way of putting it. So guys, as always, you want to go check these. I'm going to put this information on our Facebook. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Don't forget, check them out on their Facebook page or the website. We'll put information on where you can find his books. They're on Amazon and his website. And as always, guys, we always say, go check these other podcasts out. I know we'll probably listen to it on the way home tonight just to check you guys out. So
thanks, man.
I really appreciate it. And as always, guys, I'm Big Sturg.
Robbie.
DA.
And this is American and Whiskey.
I'm a big whiskey fan.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Brent,